Hey, what up, everybody? So Nate hit me up with another question, and he asked a great one. So I'm going to read it off here just so I get it in its entirety. But he said, "How would you advise a student to build a game or develop a style?" And he said, in particular, we have a lot of students at the gym right now who are reaching a point in their grappling, and I'm sure he's sharing their striking as well, where they've developed the skills to learn and execute a variety of techniques, but are overwhelmed with the number of different techniques out there. And he also said it was tough for him to provide an answer because someone just gave him a game at Blue Belt. So, first of all, one of my little weird obsessions at the moment is, and I see this all the time as a coach, right? So when people want advice on something, they'll ask multiple people and then take one of those answers. And then, so let's say you are asking advice on like what move you should work on next. You'll ask 5 people who you think are credible sources, and then you'll make a decision. But 5 people gave different advice, and then you'll credit the decision to the person who gave you the advice. But there was 5 different pieces of advice you had to choose from. So when Nate says like, "Oh, someone gave me a game," Nate's trained a lot of different places over the years, moving around, and has been exposed to a lot of different grapplers. So I'm sure he's gotten a lot of advice. So at a certain point, you're going to go with a piece of advice that resonates with you. So even if somebody lays out specifically, "I want you to do A, B, C, D," the fact that you're putting trust in them and choosing that advice is in itself a choice that you are making and actively participating in. So let's start off with that. So developing your style. One thing that is a big part of my philosophy overall, and I credit a lot of this to Josh Waitskin, or at least maybe I made the active choice of choosing to credit Josh Waitskin. But his basic philosophy in the art of learning is that you will be the best version of yourself when you choose a style that most resonates with your most authentic self. So if you are a happy, joyful person, you need to train, fight, compete in a happy, joyful way, and kind of go from there, right? So you can go back and forth on a bunch of different ways of doing that, but you need to find something that's authentic to you, personality-wise, and all that kind of fits together. So if you look at a bunch of different athletes, and the 2 examples I was thinking of this morning was just, Anderson Silva. You watch him in interviews and he's kind of like, oh, he's like, I don't know, da, da, da. And then he's a counter fighter, right? And you see him moving and shifting, and it definitely fits with his personality. He's not somebody who kind of leads off. He's not aggressive going forward at all times, just in his mannerisms. And you see him fight, and it's the same thing, very shifty, waiting for the other person to come to him. And I was also thinking about Gary Tonin, just because I was watching one of his fights this morning. And, he talks a lot about how he was a very hyper child with no attention span. And you watch his style, and it's this pure, kinetic, wild, fast-paced, free-flowing style. And, it definitely makes sense. It definitely fits where he's very congruent in his training and fighting with who he is as a person. So there's a million different ways to be good at combat sports. That's what's super fun about it. So you got to find that, really authentic version of yourself. And then I think another big question that a lot of people don't consider when they're asking, like, okay, well, how do I get good at grappling? Well, what does good mean to you? And you have to think about rule sets. You know what I mean? Becoming a great MMA fighter is very different than becoming a great no-gi specialist, becoming a great gi specialist. You know what I mean? So you got to understand that you're measuring yourself with. And that could be, being prepared for, martial situations, for self-defense, for different types of competitions, or for just being, a beast in the gym who has fun and is able to, tap most of your opponents just training, right? Or somebody who, maybe you're optimizing for longevity, which I know a lot of people, start to change their game over time because they want to be able to roll and make grappling an enjoyable experience, but they also want to be able to keep their body safe and have fun doing so. So all those things are going to affect your choices. And I think you got to be very purposeful about how you make those choices. And I think that stuff can change as well, right? If you don't have a clear vision for what you want 10 years from now, that's okay. Just keep, trusting the process and moving forward. But if not, you're 2 years into your journey, you're like, I want to be really good at this. And you do that for 2 years, and then your 10-year vision shifts, right? If you want to be the best, if you want to win Abu Dhabi, and you want to be the best Noogie grappler in the world, or at least, the best one you can be, then great, keep moving towards that. And then 6 years down the line, that may change, and you may all of a sudden want to be, all of a sudden optimizing for longevity, or just optimizing for fun on the mats, or whatever goes with that. So yeah, understanding the long-term goal and being your most authentic self is kind of the two big ones to begin. So the next thing is, as you're going into your journey, and I think this happens for most people around that 1 to 2 year mark, is you start becoming aware of the, bigger world around you, the world outside of your academy a little bit more in terms of training. And so hopefully you're cultivating a lot of input from other instructors, whether you're cross-training at other gyms, whether you are watching instructionals, whether you're watching a lot of the top competitors. I always advise people to try to find people with like similar body types that kind of move in a similar way and look at what works for their game. It's cultivating that inspiration. And I think the more you have those good sources coming in, the more you're going to get a lot of input. So I started training in 2005, and then so my 2 year mark of like starting to be like, oh wait, all these weird names that I keep hearing and all these tournaments that guys are talking about, what's going on? 2007 Abu Dhabi was when Robert Drysdale won the open class, and it was when Marcelo went berserker and submitted 7 of 8 before he lost to Rob. So those two guys became hugely important in my grappling journey. Obviously, I got my black belt from Rob. I specifically made the choice to move out to Las Vegas because of the kind of instructor that Rob was and the kind of competitor he was. So obviously, he's had a huge impact on my martial arts journey. And then, Marcelo, I went and trained at his academy for 3 weeks straight, twice a day, every day. And, beyond that, like subscribed to his website, watched his game, I thought our body types were fairly similar because our weights were roughly similar. And then I met him in person and realized he's like much shorter than me with thighs that are like twice the size of mine. But I digress. But he's been like a huge influence, and that, watching his style, that like kinetic movement-based style, was very influential to me as well. So, looking around at who's there, and same thing, you're going to watch 10 different competitors, but a few are going to resonate with you. So constantly bring that to the forefront. And I was just telling Kevin this the other day. I think you want to find grapplers that you want to emulate and watch a lot of them first and kind of spend a lot of time in that area. And then watch people who do it the opposite way and see how they're shutting down the guys. So if you're a kinetic grappler, find somebody who's like a slow control pressure grappler and watch what they're doing to like completely stop that. You can start learning both sides of the game. There's a lot of benefit to that. So if you're somebody who always fights on the lead, watch what counter fighters are doing to punish the lead, and watch what kind of guys get in trouble, and you can start figuring out the game from there. So last thing, let's get super specific with actionable advice. 1, look at what you do well. What positions do you tend to go to? And where are you, what moves are having success? And what sequences are you building currently? So that can be as simple as a little bit of journaling for a week of your training and rolling, and what type of partner you're going against, and what moves you hit, and what positions you touch. Massively impactful for understanding your game. So understand what you do now. Then identify which kind of partners give you trouble then look at what positions are the sticking points with those types of partners, and then start to build either new branches to your game to give you options for that type of partner, or new ways to get back and be more effective with what you're already doing. And I think that just kind of ends up being, your style, right? Like you have success, so you start to understand a move and you think about it a lot, and then you go to that move over and over, and you start to have success doing it, and then you find more and more pathways to that move, and it becomes your style. And then eventually you just make mindful decisions to add other stuff. So, for me personally, I was the beginning of my journey, like the first 9 months of grappling for me was just escaping off bottom, like literally just being mounted and trying to get back to guard. And I got very good at surviving in bad positions and escaping. And then after that, the next 9 or so was me learning to attack from guard while maintaining my guard. So guard retention with attacks. And I was doing a very traditional, like hand in the collar, attack the arm bar. If they pull out, shoot triangle. Then try to maintain my guard through the triangle. They pass off the triangle, re-guard, come back, do the same thing. Hand in collar, arm bar, triangle. And it wasn't until I got out to Team Quest and all of a sudden I had a lot of feedback of very good All-American wrestlers who were, and college level wrestlers and Olympic level wrestlers who would purposefully hang out in my guard and didn't care, punch me in the face. And all of a sudden that was the big hole in my game where it was like, okay, well, this is what I do well. Here's the hole. What do I need to do? And luckily I had a jiu-jitsu coach at the time, Brian Harper, who was incredible at guillotines. And I was watching a lot of Marcelo and he was inspiring me with his guillotine. And I was like, oh, okay, so I'll just sit up and wrap their head and then I won't get punched in the face. And it gives me different options. And most of my game built out from there. And then same thing at the time. We had two jiu-jitsu coaches at the school at the time. So Pancho Feliciano, Ricardo was our other coach. And he was, part of Checkmat, and they were the guys that were doing a ton of that coyote guard stuff before it was even called that, that little half guard game. And so we practiced that over and over and over and over. So I just became, all of a sudden closed guard was not my thing anymore. And I was basically a half guard and guillotine guy for the next couple of years, and then started building my game from there. And that's how it goes, right? So that was me at like the 2-year mark trying to figure out my game. And I think, it changes and changes and changes and changes. And I remember, Jiu-Jitsu University was like the big book and still is, right? It's masterclass on how to learn grappling or at least, Salah's perspective on it. And he said, brown belt is the belt of polishing your technique. So you don't learn new stuff at brown belt. You finish your game, right? You come in, you practice, but you make it so you can hit your A game on anyone in the world. So I went out to Vegas under Drysdale as a 2-stripe brown belt, and my perspective was my game is my game, right? Like I'm going to be an absolute guillotine killer, and that's what's gonna, take me to the next level. So I need to be able to hit that guillotine on anyone. And then I was lucky enough to have a training partner like Bendy Casimir, who knee barred me until basically the end of days. And so I was like, okay, well, it's time to expand my game. Like if I don't work on this with Bendy, and luckily he was, one of the best coaches and training partners I ever had. And he taught me so much. So like, yeah, you're going to develop a game, but that's going to keep changing and opening up and varying. And you're going to be influenced by the meta of what's going on in whatever, competition you watch the most and all this other stuff. So fun journey, fun times. But I think, the big 3 is know that long-term goalpost and find an authentic version of yourself that gets you there. 2, surround yourself with inspiration. Like just take in a lot of sources, talk to your coaches, talk to your main training partners, cross-train, watch instructionals, watch the top competitors, and just inundate yourself in options, because one of those options is going to go off like a tuning fork and you're going to start to understand it. Or those options is you're gonna keep seeing it, and then later on it's gonna all of a sudden make sense, right? There's tons of moves that I've learned 50 times before they became a huge part of what I did, and there's other ones that I learned the first time and they became a huge part. So authentic self, long-term goal, and then having that big pool of inspiration to draw on, and then lastly, know what you do, know where it fails, and start building better paths to it, better paths out of it, and other branches within that. And if you need help with, okay, quick question is always easy, like, you can just sit there and be like, what am I doing well? And ask your coaches. And one of my favorite things is to literally just analyze trends in people's games. Then document your own rules. Where am I failing? What partners stylistically give me trouble? And then lastly is, what people deal with this situation well? Who should I be watching? What moves should I be watching? What general thoughts should I be going through? And we had Frank on the stream. So I had somebody on the stream for the first time. What up, Frank? How you living? All right. Morning, caffeine kicking in. Nate, I hope that answered your question. Everybody else, I hope that gives some guidance. And all these fun little quarantine riff-offs are good stuff. So hope you guys enjoy them. Talk to you soon. Later.